Yeah.
I just saw it as I was moving across the screen.
It's one of my favorites.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Public Access America. He's Jeffrey. I'm Jason, and we get together once a week to talk about the week. I want to say thank you to Kai for complimenting us on our audio quality and for helping us make the theme song. And I wanted to say we had a new Inspirations Beyond Disabilities up with Sadie Taylor, Sadie the Blind Lady, and she reached out to us. She's making a website and she wanted more content for it. So we made an episode with her and she's kind of cool. So hopefully we get her on this show. How are you doing, Jeffrey?
Uh, well, I'm hoping that my weeks of insanity are coming to an end soon, but who knows? Yeah, well, this last week was like the hardest of it. It
Oh,
was,
I'm sorry.
I mean, it is what it is, you know.
Mm.
The great resignation has, left a lot of positions open, for
Yeah.
better or worse. And given the way the economy is sitting, the way that people are able to, with inflation being what it is, part-time positions aren't as desirable as full-time positions unless those
Hmm.
part-time positions pay really well.
Yeah. 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 I can only go from the experience around me. And I know my roommates had 4 jobs in the last 8 months. And that's simply because the jobs just weren't what he thought they would be. He went to go sell Harleys. Great job, right? They want you to make thirty phone calls and like 100 emails a day, and you have to pester people that walk in and you have to like scam them to get them to like, and he just didn't like that. And like Home Depot was the same. It was great, but management didn't understand that they were there to take care of employees. They think they're there to take care of their bosses. So the
Mm,
system's just ass backwards and it leaves all of the people that need money filling in. And I got to tell
mhm,
you, I don't even work. And this week was like a tractor pull on my soul. I can't imagine
right.
having a full schedule and kids and like family and partners and all of that. I feel I just you're one of my best friends and I don't want that for you. So I feel
You
bad,
know,
you know.
this is the thing. Like Debbie and I, we were talking about this, and just the stress of having to, do the thing constantly. And it's like
Mhm.
you do have that question pop up. At what point do you sit down and go, humanity wasn't meant to live like this?
Right. I mean,
You
I don't
know?
I don't know what people without diabetes think diabetes is. It's tough, man. It's just trying to either be way too tired or way too wired and trying to balance that according to food that you can't afford is just utterly ridiculous. The food
Mhm.
I ate celery, cauliflower, and homemade hummus for dinner. That's what I had to eat because when I had shredded mini wheats, it jacked my sugars up 200 and I couldn't get them down for 2 days,
Mhm.
And fuck, they fell last night and now they're back up again today. I'm just like, I
Yeah.
don't, it, life is such a struggle in ways that I don't think like people understand. Like, I don't know, people that don't have these problems, people that have maids and butlers and people to do things for them, like we don't have all that. We can't just put our lives on somebody else's plate so that we can
Well,
survive.
I mean, you think about it. We used to have a mechanism of doing all of this. Think real hard, but go old school.
Shit, I don't know.
We used to only have one working spouse.
That's true. Yeah, that's
You
true.
know, one person took care of the household needs, the other one took care of the income. And that's all there was, and
Wow.
some people are able to do that still, and some people aren't. And
Mm,
it's difficult.
yeah.
You, especially like when you look at the amount of debt that modern America has. Like, Debbie and I paid off our credit cards. We have zero credit card debt for the first time in, well, for me, the first time in since 2014, and for Debbie, I don't even know how long it's been,
Yeah.
but zero credit card debt. Like
Congratulations.
I can afford to put something on my credit card and then turn around and immediately pay it off. Like
That
that's a
scares the shit
first.
out of me.
But unfortunately, now I have, over $100,000 in student loan debt I have to deal with
Yeah.
because I needed to have an advanced education to make the money that I can to, it's just this, it's been this cycle. And, you know, some people are like, well, if you became a doctor, you'd be, I'm like, yeah, I'd be a $500,000 in debt and I would just die fucking broke.
Right. Somebody said to me, "Yes, my husband and I worked really hard. We went through school. We collected a lot of student debt. We spent the next 20 years paying it off. So do I want other people to have their debt relieved? Yes, because nobody should go through that."
Well, that's,
And I liked that. I really like that idea. A rape victim wouldn't hope everybody else gets raped to normalize it, right? They would want rape ended. And that's how I feel about the scam that is debt in America. Somebody said,
Mhm.
and it really hit me, Republicans feel the way to control inflation is to make people poorer so they have less to spend, right? And Democrats want to give everybody a little more money so they can afford life better. And that really hit me, you know what I mean?
and it's a weird balance. Like Republicans, what they used to be. Republicans used to be of the mindset that, they wanted to give Americans more money by removing taxes from their life.
Well,
That's what it used to be.
from their bosses too, right?
Yeah, that's what well, even individually, like, some of the tax cuts that, I was there with the Bush tax cuts. I was there,
Mm-hmm.
with the Trump tax cuts, and arguably there were some pieces of it that worked. There really were. Um, but there were also a lot of pieces of it that just didn't work. And the
Yeah.
same gets said with the Democrats. The Democrats, what they want to do is they want to increase safety and regulation. And what that does is that ends up costing a lot in terms of tax money, but
Mm-hmm.
you end up getting stability that you don't end up on this wild ride of up and down and am I boom or bust. It just kind of
Right.
peters out a little bit. And so it's just kind of like this weird juxtaposition that we end up swinging back and forth between rapid growth and expansion and just
Yeah.
dam busting, economic fallout versus stale stagnation, inflation, and just general lack of anything happening. It's like we kind of end up in this weird triangle of fiscal responsibility, stagnation, and opportunity, and you only get to pick two.
Right. The
And
idea
so
the idea is to hold the people back from the opportunities till the people that have money can create how to make it into a scam.
so it's just kind of like this weird and wild circular path. It's like, we end up, the thing about the Obama years weren't terrible. They weren't great either. Everybody wants to sit down and go, Obama was such a great president. I'd give him a C grade. He wasn't great. He wasn't terrible. It wasn't
Right.
like nothing amazing happened. Nothing really terrible happened. Like the biggest issue that we had was number one, healthcare costs shot up like crazy. I don't think the Affordable Care Act worked the way that anybody wanted it to.
It still doesn't. Mm-mm.
And on top of that, you ended up, I know that the economic side of things, Obama inherited a shit show. Let's be real honest about it. And everybody wants to, well, Obama and his low, yeah, he inherited that from the previous administration. That's just
Mm-hmm.
the way that it is.
Just like
But
Trump inherited his economics from Obama. That's the way it works.
yeah, and so, for Obama, he had to try and create stability in a time of great instability, and it took a significant amount of time for a lot of those groups that got bailouts in order to get stable again.
Yeah.
But then once things got stable, there really wasn't any policy that helped push growth. It was just kind of deadlocked. Nothing
Right. Well,
happened.
from the cars we went to the banks. You know what I mean? To the
Well,
housing market.
the
The
cars, the
at
banks,
least
the housing market was all at the same time,
Well,
and
yeah,
all
but
of
the
those things
housing market
started to
was under
heal.
Bush, but then the cars were during Obama's beginning, and then the banks were towards right when he fixed the ACA, and then he got the car manufacturers under control. Then the banks blew up. It was a tough time for Obama. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
but yeah, it was, and that all of that was during his first term. Let's be real clear. All of that happened during
Yeah,
his first
and
term.
you're right. They did nothing to prevent all of that from happening again.
Now, during his second term is when you arguably, like, Obama's president, you can go for broke and try and, get some stuff going. Granted, he was up against a majority,
Yeah.
Republican Senate and House that wasn't going to help, do
Yeah.
anything. But I would
A
also,
brand new thing called the Tea Party, which was obstructionist. Yeah.
yeah, and in a lot of ways, it was, cut off America's nose to spite its face and then come
Mhm.
in and say, we have the answers. And, that's where there was this chance, there was this opportunity to try and create growth, and it just never happened,
Right.
and I would argue that, you know, around 2012 is where we settled into this idea of it's my party's way or it's no way at all. And
Yeah.
that's where we're at today. And it's not just the Republicans that do it, it's the Democrats that do it too.
I agree. I just don't like a lot of the false equivalencies, but I can tell you that like there's just as much of complaining within the Democratic Party as there is in the Republican Party. Like the Republican Party seems diverse because of the way it's the Tea Party, it's America First, it's conservatives, it's moderates. There is no such thing as a progressive like Republican, right? But there's a progressive Democrat, and then there's moderate Democrats, and then there's the conservative Democrats. There's these factions, but they don't actually have legitimacy. It's not like they're their own parties. The independents don't have a portion of control to break up the split between halves. There's nothing like France. France didn't go more radical because within the Republicans, there's four parties, right? And those
Hmm.
parties jockey for seats, proportional representation, as do
Hmm.
like the left. And so there's different versions, like Israel too. You can't form a government unless your factions all get the seats that they got in the
Right.
election. And then if those factions equal up to support the president, that's what happens. We don't have that. It's you either get Ford or Dodge, and there is no other way for you to go.
Right.
And it kind of sucks when the party you support doesn't listen to you. Like you're telling us what the problems are. Republicans and Democrats, they're both
Hmm.
telling us what the problems are, but they're not hearing what we're saying to them. And so,
Hmm.
like a Ron DeSantis, Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump, they're all sitting in little bubbles in Florida thinking they're kings. But once they step out of that bubble and see what reality is, like Elon Musk, you're on your ivory tower. You didn't know what reality was, and now it's hitting you a little bit in the face, just a little bit, you know?
Right.
And that's the problem. It's everything's backwards. Everything
Hmm.
is working backwards. Even the school system, the way I think about it. We
Hmm.
used to have art, we used to have music, we used to have break times for our minds to imagine, and we just don't the kids don't get that anymore.
No.
It's all what do they call that? Core education or whatever it is?
Well, I don't even know what you can really call it anymore.
Yeah.
It's really wild.
It's
And
housing kids at a cost effective way.
in yeah, yeah, kind of, I would say. Because a lot of the times you just end up with a bunch of administration, and it's like I don't even know why we have so much administration
Right.
when the issues at hand are more about, you know, our kids, getting adequate food when they're at school, our kids getting,
Yeah.
adequate number, student to teacher ratio. Like I would honestly be curious what the admin to student ratio looks like in certain areas,
I
because
agree.
I guarantee you it's like it's for example, I'm gonna pick on Florida. Like somebody went through all of these fucking math books to find out
Uh-huh.
if there was woke math, and I'm going, man, all I know is that I had like the same math books like from the 19 fucking 80s. Like nothing changed.
Right. But there
And
is a question like if a person was three-fifths of a person and you had 40 people, how many people would that be? Like it's acknowledging that slavery existed without tackling the issue, and he had a problem with that. Well, two reviewers out of the I think 12 that reviewed books found two examples that they had an issue with that nobody else had an issue with.
and that's the problem is
Hmm.
that you can copy that across the board. So you got 2 people out of 12 that have an issue. So those 2 people are going to change it for everybody. And I would
Right.
argue that's what the Republican Party looks like right now. A
Yeah.
couple of people have an issue. They're being the most vocal and the most bonkers. And rather than the rest of the party going, you know what, shut up. This is fucking dumb.
Yeah.
They're like, you know what, fuck it. We'll just let them run with it and we'll see what happens.
I think Republicans are like, this is out of control. People have way too many rights. Let's gather all of the rights under our tent and then we will disperse them the way we believe we need to disperse them. Like
Mhm.
Joe Manchin said this Women Protection Act was too expansive. And that blew my mind because how much is too much of a right? You're giving women 70% of their rights. That's too much. 80%, is that too much? How much is acceptable? Like, why are we negotiating women's rights like that? And why is it Joe fucking Manchin, one guy, one man in the whole Democratic Party saying, no, I know best, women. You don't know what you're trying to get. I'll tell you what you need. What the fuck? Stay out of it, Joe.
Or my personal favorite, that I was actually just reading right before I got on is the Oklahoma governor warning the tribes not to create abortion havens in the state of Oklahoma.
Wow.
I'm going, that's not a real good look if you know anything about, treaty rights between the U.S. government and the tribes, and telling them what they can and can't do on their own land is that's a decision that you've made, and yee.
Yeah.
And so, you know what? It's one of those things. It's like I don't understand like
They
why
don't ha-
politics is in this current state that it is. It is
because they're
batshit
not
fucking
mixing. They're
insane.
not mixing. They're sitting within groups of like 10 like-minded people in an echo chamber. So when the governor of Alabama or Mississippi or Louisiana says, we're going to deny all trans people their rights because it's gross, they go back into their meeting and everybody gives them a high five and goes, yeah, you're right. But the problem is that there's like what? 40 million other Oklahomans that don't feel that way, that aren't involved in the conversations that lead them to that radical point. Like, we sit here every day and we do the math of our conversation. How did we get to this? How did we
Mhm.
get here? Well, you can listen and hear how we got to the point we got to. But Republicans don't do that. They sit in their little meetings and go, okay, okay, and they get more radical and bounce things off like we do. And then they reach a point of racism makes sense. It's like,
They come up
no,
with some
it
of these
doesn't.
absolutely bonkers scenarios and
Yeah,
boogeymen out there, and it's
but
like,
they get there. But they get there. How did they get there? They don't tell us how they got there.
well, and that's, for example, with this investigating whether or not, helping kids get trans affirming care is child abuse. Like, I'm sitting here
Right.
going, so what you're telling me is that there's a child and the parents have to be involved. They're having a conversation and they're coming to the conclusion that this care is necessary, so they go seek out a doctor who
Right.
is accredited by, whatever boards they have to be accredited by. They are
Mm-hmm.
licensed, insured, educated, all of this. They have conversations. They have very, very, very strict rules on how they can and can't proceed in these sort of scenarios. Like, great interview was out there about how, like, over a series of like a year's worth of meetings, if there's ever any sort of inkling that, this person might be waffling on whether or not they, want this care, they
Yeah.
have to say no. Like, that's the
Yeah.
that's the rule that they have to follow. And so all of this to say that, there have been all of these quote unquote, freedoms of choice, and all of this time spent investigating whether or not this is an actual thing, and these states are going, no, you're not free to choose.
And I don't understand that. I don't understand the threat that a trans person poses to the country.
That's the thing, is like it's not even, I want to make myself clear. It's not about choosing to be trans. Let's make
Oh
sure
no,
that
you're
we
not
understand that
choosing to be trans.
it's that
No.
it's that choice of going through all of these different, talking with your parents and coming to that,
Yeah.
consensus. talking to healthcare professionals, going through that consensus. Like that's an active choice that, a person has to make, to go through to all of these hoops in order to get to, gender affirming care.
Of course. The way I liken it to right now is, imagine being in pain your whole life, like just this agonizing pain, and then a doctor says, I can relieve that pain because the pain isn't who you are. And he gives you treatment and you're not in pain anymore and you're free to be happy and stuff. People that want to transition, they're in pain. They're in agony because they don't match. What they feel doesn't match what they show, and they don't. It's so irritating. It's like having an itch you can't get at. It's just, you want to be yourself, and I don't
Mhm.
understand why people care. Why people? I don't understand why Texas feels they need to get involved in a young child's
Now,
search.
and that's the biggest problem is that, when you look at parties, they're like, these are the rights that you're going to get to have. And the thing is that, when you look at the way that the Republican Party is pushing, it's on things that, it doesn't make any sense, because,
Right.
this is the same group of people that says, being gay is a choice. So when somebody chooses some, quote unquote, chooses something, then they immediately flat, they sit down and they go, oh, freedom of choice, freedom of choice, freedom of choice. The moment they, quote unquote, choose, because that's how they view it,
Right.
suddenly it's the wrong choice, like it's bad. And it's like, no, that's not how you platformed. I don't understand this.
Yeah, because I want a life where I'm hated to 40 by 60% of the country all of the time. Like,
Yeah, who
nobody
the fuck is
chooses
choosing?
that.
Yeah, nobody chooses to live life on hard mode like that.
Right. And guess what? It's our opportunity to do that. My friend asked me that, she said, "My daughter told me she's thinking about transitioning." And she said, "What do I do?" I said, "You support her, because
Hmm.
either she'll save her money and make that what she wants to do, or she'll phase out and think that maybe she's just non-binary. Maybe the more opportunities she has to be free and dress like how she wants to dress and eat how she wants to dress and cut her hair the way she wants to cut her hair, she'll find an equilibrium that doesn't mean transitioning. Or maybe she'll feel so strongly about it that she'll save up her money. You can also help her financially get there, but you don't have to make that decision at all. It's her decision. It's the child's decision to make, right? Until
Yeah.
it affects the parent in some way monetarily. Or I could see a parent going, you understand that might be a difficult road to travel, but I'm here for you. You
Well, and
know?
that's exactly. It's like, you support your kids in their journey,
Yeah,
and you don't. This is one of those things where, you may not fully understand it. Fuck, I'll never fully understand it. It's just not mine to understand.
I
How
don't
could I?
have to, right? I don't have to. I just have to support them because
Exactly.
I
And
because I love them. Because I love them.
and you just, as a parent, you also have to make it very clear, like, what your limitations of support are. And I'm not saying, like, like, when I say limitations of support, I'm not saying, this is all that I'm willing to accept. It's more like, this is all that I can afford to do.
Right. I have
You
two
know,
jobs. I can't take on another job to help you pay for that, but I will
and
definitely be there to support you with rides
right,
and everything else.
right. And that's the tough part, because, as a parent, you want to help, your kid get,
Mm-hmm.
the care that they need, but you also have to live within the confines of the way that the current system works. And the current system is that, in most cases, gender affirming care is considered elective, and so you're not getting coverage for this stuff. You're
Right.
paying out of pocket.
Right.
So, and it is highly dependent on where you're at too, and it's highly dependent on the plan that you have, and it's highly dependent on any number of different things.
Yeah.
It's a rough road when somebody just, when somebody decides they want to seek that care,
Mm-hmm.
but then you have, like everything else, you have an entire deck of cards stacked against you in order to, make it through, to
I
get
know.
to whatever what your desired outcome is. I Yeah, reason number 110,361 why the medical system currently is in a fucking mess. The fact that you have political parties deciding what healthcare professionals do is just absolutely insane to me.
Right.
Could you imagine if the role was reversed? Doctors had to tell politicians what they could and couldn't do in the political realm. Not even just like imagine somebody who's imagine somebody who is literally just a who's a heart surgeon. Their specialty is heart surgery.
Yeah.
And they go into politics and say, no, now here's how you need to do roads and bridges. And they know nothing about roads and bridges.
Oh, hi, Rand Paul. How are you doing? I didn't see you
He's
there.
a fucking optim. But he's a doctor. I'm like, he's a fucking eye doctor.
And he obviously knows more about foreign wars and all
The
that
thing
than
about
we
Rand,
do.
the thing about
God.
Rand Paul is that I don't know what his schedule looks like, but I'm pretty sure it's, every day his brain calls in with anal glaucoma because his brain just definitely is not seeing his ass come into work today. It's just not happening.
Yeah.
Like like his body shows up and his brain's like, yeah, fuck it, I'm gonna flip the switch off and I'm just gonna just whatever comes out is what you get.
Well,
Fuck you.
whatever the Kremlin readout says is what he does. I think him and Ron Johnson should just start form the Communist Party and get it over with. You know what I mean?
It's just so fucking wild. Like and then but he's a doctor.
He's a doctor, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm totally going to go to an eye doctor for a discussion on women's
Transcare,
health care,
yeah,
trans health
right.
care, whether or not I should get a fucking vasectomy, or whether or not I have colon cancer.
Right. You know,
He's a fucking eye doctor.
that
Jesus
made me
fucking
think
Christ.
about something. You want women to have more babies for some reason, and you don't want to make an economy that benefit. You want to keep people poorer to stunt inflation, but if you keep us poorer, we don't have the money to have more babies. It's your economic decisions that cause the amount of abortions. If Jeffrey could sit at home all day and have babies while Devi went to work at one job and made a living wage, maybe they'd have more kids. Maybe I would have had more kids if I wasn't fucking stuck making literally nothing and busting my ass 60 hours a week, you know? So that went with the Joe Manchin. Who the fuck are you?
And that's the other thing is, the Republican Party's like, oh, buy all these luxury goods, buy all these luxury goods.
How?
You don't, you when you have one person that's an earner and
Right.
you have a number of kids, luxury goods are not what's going to happen.
No,
You're
your
going to
kid
have,
is the luxury good.
right. It's like, why do you think, the 50s and 60s looked the way that it did?
Yeah.
People are like, oh, go out and buy things, video game consoles, TVs, all these other things. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I understand why my mom only had one TV. I understand why, everything that they did was play outside with make believe
Right.
because you can't fucking afford all of these different things. And, at the time, means of production was very limited. So,
Yeah.
having one TV was a fucking luxury. I get it.
And
But
theft
now,
theft was out of the question back then too, by the way. Nobody went over to their neighbor's yard and stole like metal, so go recycle it. You know what I mean? It's like that wasn't how the world worked. Scams weren't rampant. You know, you could live
mhm,
your life like if you earned $2,000, you knew you had $2,000. It's not like it was going to be chipped away with fees and tricks and,
right.
weird things that suddenly happen. Oh, your property taxes are being raised by 25%. Why? Well, because the governor hates Disney. Damn. you know, I just bought a house here.
Well, and that's one of those things too. It's like everybody sits down and they think that, okay, I'm finally, this party is finally going to get it right. And no, they don't. They really
No.
don't.
Mm-mm.
It's one of those things. It's why I tell people, welcome to why I'm a libertarian. It's like I've sat down and I've watched as both of these main parties just, you know, are there good things that they can do at times? Sure, absolutely.
Yep.
But by the vast majority of things that they do, I either end up dealing with people trying to turn my country into a theocratic society, or I deal with them trying to legislate me into, having to ask daddy government if I can breathe. And
Right.
it neither of those things work for me.
Mm-mm.
It's
I was
like,
thinking about it with education, and you made me bring that back. The thing about our education system is kids would get more use out of just documentaries playing on the wall. But the point of it, when you said teacher to student ratio, it made me think there's kids that learn a little differently.
Mhm.
They need that musical program in their day so that they can imagine the solutions that they had to ponder in their first classes, right? But then there's folks like you or Dan, maybe you don't need the music as much because you are more scientific. You need more of a biology, a chemistry. You need that sort of stimulation. And then there's other kids, they're like, I need to get to gym. I want to play basketball. I want to play football. I want to move because it's the exercise that gives me the
Mhm.
endorphins that make me imagine solutions. And so every kid's different. And we can't just shove them in a box and throw rabbit food into it and say survive. That's a
And you can't
horrible way for our educational system to be.
and you can't throw a bunch of homework at them afterwards and expect them to be happy and healthy, you know.
Yeah, you're not
I
teaching them how to process the
I asked
answers.
I asked my mom, you know, because I wanted the answer. You know, what did homework look like for you when you were a kid? How much homework
Right.
did you come home with? 30 minutes tops. Like
Mm-hmm.
per class? And my mom was like, "What? No,
No.
for every class
Right.
total."
You were given time in the class to do the homework.
And you had study halls throughout the day.
Uh-huh. And lunch and
Yeah.
friends. Yeah.
So, you know, you had the opportunity to get stuff done so that way if you did have any sort of homework, it was very minimal.
Right.
And that's the problem is that, you know, you have kids that are literally going to school in my, you know, my kid's case going from school to from 7 a.m. until um, you
3.
know, 3:30,
Yeah.
and then after that they can have anywhere from, you know, 30 minutes to 3 hours worth of homework to do at the end of the day. And that's, think about that, you know. And then you're
Mm-hmm.
telling, so then what ends up happening is that all of those kids who now have spent all of their time doing their homework now have to eat, try and find, you know, something to unwind with,
Right.
and they wonder why kids are staying up until fucking midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning with their friends, and then getting up at 6 o'clock to do it again the next day.
And why they're so stressed and why there's school shootings and why there's anxiety and autism and all of this stuff rampant in our schools and ADHD. It's because of the pressure we put on our kids.
Well, the autism and the ADHD I wouldn't put towards that, but I would say
Well,
that
let's say that
there's a
it's
lot of pressure because they don't know how
yeah.
to teach kids on the spectrum, or
That
they don't
stuff
know how to work with kids that are on the spectrum.
pressure reveals sometimes things that aren't that are you can handle certain things, you can hide certain things, you can mask certain things, but pressure puts you on the spot. And when it's noticed in school, it should be noticed in school. But somebody with autism that's homeschooled that can step away from things, you might not really notice it as much, is all I'm trying to say, you know.
That's,
School reveals things, pressure,
well, I
peer
mean,
pressures and academic pressures that just puts such a stress on you. I could see why you could form or why where it could increase these things. You know what I mean?
well, it's overstimulation is what it
Yeah.
is. You
You
know,
don't
they
have
don't,
you don't have the time to decompress from it. So when
you
you're
don't
at a
have the,
10 and go back to an 11 and then back and relax at a 9, yeah, that's what I'm
yeah,
trying to say.
exactly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, we'll get there.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I don't think those things are created out of pressure,
no,
but
no, no.
I think people have these tendencies naturally that can be made better or worse through care or pressure.
Well, I think, you know, it goes to that point of, you know, when you look at overstimulation, you just, you start to see more of these problems come to the surface. And so then the
Hmm.
question is, you know, are people being stimulated too much with school? Is there too much going on that kids are not able to, you know, actually develop healthy
Yeah.
habits? You know, you think about it, it's like the pressure for kids to do any number of different topics, you know, prior to graduating. You know, even for me 10 years ago, not even 20 years ago now, actually, doing things like trigonometry and
Mm.
chemistry and physics were meant for people who were more advanced.
Then
And
you?
now, it's almost like you have to take this stuff
Ah,
just to
right.
graduate. And it's like, no, like as somebody who literally is a mathematician, who
Right.
does data analysis, who does, tracking and trending, who uses complex equations to
Mm-hmm.
solve for problems. No, the vast, like I love my education in chemistry and physics. I have never used it.
Right.
And that's the thing is like I know enough about it now to where I can have conversations on it. But if you're trying to tell me that all kids need to learn those things, I'm going to tell you no. They need to know the basics.
Right.
We need to understand gravity, and you need to understand, how chemical reactions work just a little bit. Like, fun fact, when you make toast, that's a chemical reaction. Ooh, things that
Right.
learn
Baking
simple
soda
things.
is man-made. What?
Dihydrogen monoxide is not poison. Things
Right.
like that, enough to understand that people are going to use certain things to try and,
Yeah.
just enough to understand what the basics are and how to look things up in a way that, you know, kids have these great tools at their fingertips now. And we should be teaching them more about how to look things up. One of the
Yes.
things that we always said in my master's program was is that it's not that most of us were smarter than the average individual. It's that we just learned how to use Google better for the problems that we needed to solve.
I needed my friend to teach me how to search. I had no idea. I was typing paragraphs into the search bar because I was like, well, I want to know how to do this. And he was like, just use the keywords. You don't need to diagnose your engine on in the Google search bar. You just look up, you know, your engine number. I was like, oh, like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. And when I took math, it was consumer math. I had to learn how to balance a checkbook, but Jeffrey, I
Hmm.
didn't know what the fuck a checkbook was, So it's the same as trigonometry. If I don't have any basis in it, why would I understand it?
But
Like,
the difference there was is that when you became an adult, you
yeah, I
were going
used
to
it.
have a you were
Uh-huh.
going to use it. Now, like, my kid was sitting down here like, what do you know about checkbooks? And I actually started laughing, and I'm like,
Right.
oh shit, they're still teaching this?
Right. But and,
Like,
and that's the thing. Like, wouldn't you rather have, instead of giving your kid 3 hours of homework, give your kid 1 hour of family time where you're all on your devices coming up with like my teacher wanted me to ask at the dinner table about trigonometry, what
mhm,
we all knew about it. And then we
be
could
the
all
only one that
sit
would
there,
be able to answer.
but or okay, checkbooks. My teacher wanted me to ask the table this. And your kids, and that gives you something to talk about. And then you can actually search together and be like, oh, here's a resource I found. Here's a resource I found. Instead of go to the encyclopedia, here's the link, here's the book, here's the page, read that, memorize it, and repeat it back to me so I know that you might remember it. I think the
Mhm.
family discussion might be a better opportunity than homework. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, all right, it's time to take something to task here
That would
because
help parents too, as well, by the way.
I got something that actually pisses me off.
Uh-oh,
So
cool.
after the leaked draft opinion had come out, a bunch of students across the country decided to stage a walkout on a particular day.
Okay.
Now, my kids informed me ahead of time, and they informed Debbie and I, and it's like, yeah, okay, cool. Let's go over some safety things, just because this is a very heated topic,
Yeah.
and hopefully, while I hope that you're safe protesting, understand that there's any number of issues that can crop up. Make sure you got your phones fully charged, have your battery packed with. They packed snacks, they had raincoats, they had any number of different things,
Fucking millennials.
you know, because and a lot of this they did on their own. They were just like,
Yeah.
what do you think about this? I'm like, I wouldn't do that. Or what about this? No, that's actually a really good idea. You should definitely do that.
Yeah.
And it's like,
But they
but the
go
biggest one,
prepared, man. We just went high. We just went high with a sign. Like, they're
I mean,
packing supplies and stuff. That's so cool to me.
but now you look at but that's the thing though, is that the way that the political climate is right now, the days of just going high with a sign are just not a thing anymore, because
I know.
you have people that literally show up looking for a violent clash at these things. Like, that's what they're hoping for. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, that's a terrible decision. And
Right.
so and so, my kids were like, we're walking out of school. Okay, best of luck. Go do it. So they left. And uh, I get a message from the school saying that, they have an unexcused absence. So I call to excuse the absence. I'm like, whatever, it's not a big
Nice.
deal. The school won't excuse the absence.
Oh, okay.
And they won't excuse it because, well, we're a closed campus and without the parent checking the kids out and this, that, and the other. I'm like, I want you to understand something very clearly. Number one, it's not like the kids were just leaving because they felt like going to the fucking grocery store to get a candy bar. Or, that they were headed out to go get themselves high on drugs or do whatever weird, crazy thing that the school has painted this imaginary scenario to be. There is a very important issue to these kids that they felt that it was incumbent upon them to leave class and go to the state capitol to actually protest. And there were hundreds of kids there, and a bunch of other people that were there as well. And so when I called to excuse the absence, what I told the school was, I'm excusing my kids for the day because they are out exercising their First Amendment right to free speech and getting a first-hand lesson in government civics. And to me, that should be it. It's like they were exercising their First Amendment right to
Right.
free speech, and they were getting a first-hand lesson in government civics.
I like that. I
That's an
mean,
educational moment, is what it is. It really is an educational moment. And the school's like, no, unexcused. I went, I'm
okay.
sorry, what? So the school is telling me that they're not going to excuse it.
Of
Like,
course.
so here's the problem then. Why are they
Because
asking?
you followed the rules, you did everything they asked, and then they
Nope.
changed a rule. They inflated a rule and made it more important at that time.
Well, and here's the problem. If I excuse the absence, they're contacting me saying, hey, your kid has an unexcused absence.
Mm-hmm.
Please call in to excuse it. And I call in to
To
excuse it.
excuse it.
That is not the school's, it should not be the school's decision to say, no, we're not going to excuse it.
Exactly. And if your kid,
Especially when I can prove that if it's not, for some type of doctor's appointment,
mm-hmm.
that it's actually for, I would call it an educational purpose.
Yeah, a field trip.
It literally is an unplanned field trip that
Right.
has an absolute important purpose to not only their lives
Mm-hmm.
with the legislative process that is unfolding before them, but also even just that firsthand experience of what does exercising my First Amendment rights look like?
And why do I need to do it? What's the importance of it? Yeah. But
Why is it important to have that that education in government civics?
mm-hmm.
you know that was a learning opportunity for those kids that, whether or not you agree with the politics or why they checked out, I mean, doesn't matter. The fact of the
Well,
matter
yeah.
is that this was like, if you want kids to come out of school informed and learning how systems
Yeah.
work, this was their firsthand self-guided view of learning what that looks like.
Right.
And what you're telling them is that their First Amendment right doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
because you have your own rules. And I would argue that you are looking at the school infringing upon First Amendment rights, and because the school is a part of the government is not allowed to infringe upon First Amendment rights. Let's
Or
put that out there.
punish, right?
Right.
Punish you
And
for
so
using them.
like that's a case that I'd be willing to take.
Mm-hmm.
That's a case that I'd be willing to try and deal with. Like, I don't view any harm that's going to come to my child, from them having one unexcused absence. But I do not
Right.
believe that when I excuse my kid because they are exercising their First Amendment right, that the government has any reason to tell me no, they're not going to excuse them.
Right. And we're going to punish your kid because you're making a bad choice. And
I
let me
think it's a
ask you
great
something.
choice.
If your child was the only child that day that left and they called and said, "Hey, your child has an unexcused absence," and you were like, "Oh no, we had a family matter, somebody died or something, whatever the would they keep it an unexcused absence, or would they understand? Was it the protest that made them mad? Was it the kids all walking out and they were like, we have to punish this so it doesn't happen again? Or was it, in fact, your
Well,
child not being checked out properly? If your
well,
child was the only one that was checked out improperly, would they forgive that?
Well, and here's what I can say is that, I actually had one of my kids, they, after a particularly rough day, they had gone to a couple of classes and then they went home. Um, and because we had talked about it, it's like, hey, if mentally you're not there, you can
Mm-hmm.
go home and we'll excuse it. And the school had no problem excusing that.
Right. That's my point.
So the issue then is, if your problem is that kids are going out to protest, then I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, you are infringing upon their First Amendment rights.
Right.
And do you really want to play that game? Now, do I think now they're going to argue, but that opens the door for any time that a kid wants to leave campus to say that they're exercising their First Amendment rights? No, no, it doesn't. Going to a planned protest at the Capitol is First Amendment, period,
Yeah.
end of story. Going to the grocery store for a candy bar is not First Amendment. And
Right.
any judge is going to look at that and go, no, that's you skipping school. That's truancy, is what that is.
But in fact, your job as the school is to inform the parent, right?
Hmm.
And they did that. Now it's the parent's discretion on whether that was a bad thing or a good thing, right?
Right.
Like, if okay, my kid went to the store to get a candy bar, and because they weren't feeling good, and then they went home because they felt like shit. Well, guess what? They're a fucking diabetic and needed candy because they had low blood sugar. It's not up to you to judge my kids' actions. It's up to me, right?
And if I'm going to excuse it, like,
Right.
you know, look, if my kids were missing school every fucking day and I'm calling in to excuse it every day,
Right.
yeah, you have every right to come to my house and do a
Mm-hmm.
truancy check.
Talk to the
Absolutely.
parent and ask the parent, are you making wise choices, you know?
Absolutely. But when there's a specific event happening and
Uh-huh.
there's a specific purpose, and it is very much dedicated to a person's right to free speech,
Mm-hmm.
and I would also argue an excellent lesson that you can only get firsthand, not in a government class.
Agreed.
This is something where any school needs to look at this and go, you know what? It's not our job to agree or disagree. Our
Right.
job is to say your kid was unexcused. If the parent is excusing them for this, great. Now,
Mm-hmm.
does that leave now for the parents that might not have, been cool with their kid leaving school? What does
That's
that do?
right.
Well,
Well,
that's up to the parent.
that's up to
And
the parent.
and so where I guarantee you're going to have a household where parents believe one set of things, kids believe another set of things, and the kid follows their beliefs. And then if the parent says, no, I'm not going to excuse that, that's up to the parent and the kid to then deal with their stuff together.
That's right. Yeah, and you got to remember that at their age, this is largely performative. There's no violence to it. There's no, I don't want to be a jerk, but they're learning, but there's no real meaning. You know what I mean? Because
it's
they
it's
can't vote. Like
they
the
can't
politicians
it's
look at kids and they just go, "Shut up! You don't vote." Like what I mean? It's not like they're gonna create any act. They're gonna create awareness, which is good. But kids are pretty much performative. There's no
I would but
plan.
here's the
There's no Antifa plan to fucking like attack.
but here's what I would say is that you can say it's performative, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would also say it's informative, because
Oh
what
yeah, yeah,
happens
yeah.
what happens is that when they see that these peers are not going to listen to them and what they
Mm-hmm.
value as important, those kids become voters eventually. And
Yes.
when those kids see that this group of people isn't going to value them, they are
Mm-hmm.
going to become voters that vote for things that you're not going to like, period, end of
Right.
story. And guess what? It is your job to either help chauffeur them into the system in that regard, show them what this looks like, what is possible,
Yeah.
or you can be a dickhead about it and they're going to form their own opinions and beliefs without your input. And whether or not you agree with it, well, it becomes even less involved with you. you
Right.
will you will just be there watching and observing the things that they do. It's kind of like that ruling with an iron fist as a parent. You shouldn't be fucking surprised that when your kid finally leaves that they just go fucking crazy and wild.
Wow, I was thinking about that about transgender rights and abortion rights. Try telling a kid no. You can't. You can't even look into it. That's all they're gonna do. And here's the other thing about these protests, there's no kid gloves for them. When you're going to a protest, there's some dangers there that kids need to know about. So the parents should know these things ahead of time like your kids did. Like
Mhm.
parents shouldn't overreact to what their kids are going to do anyway, but they should help them get through it like you did. There's kids that didn't tell their parents about this because they knew their
Absolutely.
parents would worry and helicopter. But kids should know there's dangerous elements at every protest, and it might get out of hand in a way that you didn't expect really fast.
And that's, and that was, and my goal is like, look, my kids viewed this as very important to them. Great. How can I help? Is there anything I can do to help?
You're right.
And basically it's like, okay, here's what I would recommend bringing along. Here's what I would recommend watching out for. And
Right.
if things suddenly turn heated and things get violent,
Right.
here is your plan of escape.
Yes.
Let's look at that. It's like,
Pay attention.
luckily,
Pay attention early. If people around you start yelling and pushing, get out of there. Right?
mhm.
Like, pay attention to your surroundings. That'll tell you where to go every time.
And guess what? It was peaceful. It dispersed.
Of
My
course it
kids
was.
literally messaged me. One was like, "Yeah, I'm catching a ride, back, home on the bus with, a couple other friends." And the other's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, we're heading downtown to find some pizza." I'm like, "Cool."
Right. What was the discussion like with you guys all when you got together? Did they talk about it with you and everything?
They they talked a little bit about it.
Right.
There was a bunch of different speakers. They got to listen to a lot of different messages, why what they were doing was important,
Yeah.
any number of things. And for kids to get that hands-on experience, that hands-on chance to learn something, it's absolutely incredible,
Yeah.
because this is one of those things where you don't really know how often you're going to get lessons like this. You don't really know how often you're going to deal with something that impacts you directly.
Right.
And it's important that if something drives you out to the streets to protest, that you exercise your First Amendment rights. And more importantly, explain what the First Amendment does and doesn't cover. It's like, I'm sorry, First Amendment rights, they cover the right to free speech. They don't cover violence.
Right.
It's like, I get it. You can be pissed and smash out a bunch of windows. That's not freedom of expression though.
Do they cover temporary chalk on a sidewalk?
Well, see, I laughed at that
Yeah.
because when they wrote in chalk outside of somebody's sidewalk,
Susan
uh,
Collins.
yep, I was trying to think of who it was.
Yeah.
I actually laughed because Susan Collins acted all affronted. Here in Olympia, they
Yeah.
actually spray painted
Yeah.
on our mayor Cheryl Selby's house,
Right.
and she's a Democrat, and she called them
I
fucking
know.
terrorists.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
wow.
There is a different brand of protesters over there, you know? Like
Like,
somebody tried comparing the protests in front of Alito's house to the Black Lives Matters protests, and I was like, there's no comparison. Like,
no.
but then you think about Portland and wow, like there's another
Portland and
brand.
Seattle, those were
Yeah. But see, when I watched those protests, I watched journalists getting shot. Like I watched them getting peppered with fireworks and rubber bullets, and like I
yep.
didn't see a lot of protesters fighting. I saw a lot of them running or standing. Like I didn't see them attacking police until police decided to like fucking start pushing them. So my version of it was different. And a lot of times I think that there's an element that goes to these things, like you said earlier, to cause trouble. I don't know who they are, but their idea is to make the protest look bad. And they do that in every
Well,
minority sort of protest,
it's
you know?
and that's I don't even know that it's that their idea is to make the protest. I do think that there is that element, but I also do think that there's the element out there that they think that what they're doing is actually going to start a revolution.
Ah, like
And
all
and
over the country, we're gonna burn
right,
down the rich man's stuff and leave. It doesn't
right.
work.
And like, this is one of those things where I can only, from what I have read, from what I have watched, I can only look at things objectively from the lens that I have seen through history. And that is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the civil rights protests worked the way that they did because they weren't, there was violence, but there was only one party that was being violent.
Right.
And that group of people lost sympathy.
That's right. That's what Gandhi knew. Let them beat you. Don't react. If you don't react, it shows the world that they're the tyrant. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yep.
And so that's what happened. That was what happened. But when you look at a lot of the other protests, with the groups of people who didn't react, they did great things.
Yes.
They really did manage to start changing things
In an
within their
ethnic
community.
coalition too, by the way. It wasn't just black people. Like
Right.
even Al Frank or what's his name? Reverend for what's his name? Sharpton. Even
Al Sharpton.
Sharpton said thank you to all the white people, the disabled people, the Native American people, the Latino people. He said it
Mhm.
was amazing the diversity that came out, the younger, the older.
Right.
That was a really it was a really great moment for America because of a really shitty fucking situation.
But when you look at the places where things turned violent, you didn't see the same level of change.
Okay.
You didn't see the same level of positive forward movement, because now instead of having just a bunch of cops using pepper balls and flashbangs on a bunch of peaceful
Mm-hmm.
protesters, you had two parties that were arguably, in some cases just as violent, clash with each other. I mean, you look at what happened with the East Seattle Police Department, where they tried to burn it down. I mean,
Right.
it's like,
That was a whole quadrant. They took over a whole protesters took that quadrant over of the city for months, right?
for a couple months, I want to say,
Yeah.
but then it petered out
Of course
be-
it did.
because it became a lawless area.
Mm-hmm. Because the
You
only
know,
people with time to do that are people without like lives. you know?
it became a lawless. It became
Yeah.
lawless in that area, and I don't mean that like sans police. What I mean is all of these tenants that they had put in place for these occupied protests.
Mm-hmm.
They All of their quote unquote rules fell apart. Like, there was a lot of love initially, there was a lot of really great excitement, but then you started having people getting shot and stabbed and
Yep.
robberies and all of that, and they would call the police to come try and deal with this, and the police were like, no,
What?
you told us you didn't want us there, so
Right.
we're not going there.
And then there was a lot of owners that couldn't open their doors that lost businesses in that area. You need a plan. Like we go out and we rush out there because of a protest because of something, but nobody has the long-term plan other than to just yell and shout into the wind, and that sucks, you know?
Yeah.
But that's the activist. Like I tell everybody, it takes everyone in the chain from Deja to us to the activist. You know what I mean? The
Right.
advocate to the activist to the legislator. It takes all of us. Activists get the attention, but advocates tell you the message, and that's what we do, I think.
And absolutely, that's one of the biggest problems that you've seen consistently with large protests.
Mm-hmm.
You've watched as Occupy Wall Street was a great idea. Wall Street was completely fucking things over,
Right.
but you watched it completely fall apart due to infighting, and
Mm-hmm.
rather than sticking to a strategic set of goals, it just fell apart.
Yeah, they lose the goals because they didn't put any thought into what they wanted. They just
Well,
wanted it
they
to stop, right? And they just
well,
didn't know how to ask for it.
Well, they wanted it to stop, and that's a perfectly fine goal. But the problem
Mm-hmm.
was is that
Then what?
they didn't even get that. They started moving the goalposts. It's like, well, we want all of this, and then you had competing parties saying, no, we
Ah,
want this and that, and then there's just fracture, 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 fracture,
yep,
and
yep, yep.
nothing changed. And you started to see that with the protests from 2020,
Mm-hmm.
but in some places things did change. Some changed because, well,
Yeah,
shit went sideways. Other places changed because they wanted to get ahead of issues like that.
yeah.
And they're like, you know what? There are some legitimate complaints here. Like, why couldn't we just have someone who, they're a police officer, but they're a peace officer. They're
Yeah.
going out there, they're not doing anything other than, trying to deal with things in a civil community manner. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do we get things fixed without fucking things up? How
Community
with
oversight
shooting
commission,
without Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So
You
in
give the
some
people
ways,
subpoena power and you let them see the evidence and then they bring it, right? Like the community panels like that, if you give them subpoena powers, they can actually make a difference.
so in some places you actually saw change that didn't really get rocked by protests at all,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
because they looked at what was happening across the country and they went, you know what, there are some valid things here that should be changed, and let's make those changes before we have a problem ourselves.
Yes, because plan ahead or fall behind, right?
Or what I tell people is you can be compliant on your own volition, and yeah, it sucks that you're going to have to spend the money on it, but
Mm.
it's either that or you become compliant based on penalties, whether that's
Right.
lawsuits, whether that's the government coming in, whatever that looks like. It is usually easier to change because you want to
Yes.
than it is to change because you have to, and now are being forced to pay out the nose.
And that's Jeffrey's Just the Tip. Thank you for listening to Public Access America. Find us anywhere you find your favorite podcast and check us out on YouTube, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll be back this Thursday with more great episodes. And we're back. So, Jeffrey, 10 abortions were committed in Buffalo, New York, right? Am I hearing this right?
No.
Sorry. See, I see murder as a late term abortion and I want to tie it all into it because I
No,
think
what you
there's
saw was a hate crime take place.
yeah, and I made a note because I didn't want to I mean, I don't know anything about it, right? Like it happened on the weekend. I didn't get a lot of news, but I did check out Twitter and I made a note about replacement theory. But do you know what happened before we start talking about
Dude,
this awful thing, this
dude
awful
had
replacement theory?
dude had typed out a manifesto. Um, Drove several hours to a black community and targeted black people in a mass shooting.
Because of course, that's what normal is. That's what rational is now in America, right?
And here's
What the fuck?
here's here's the problem is that this is not a unique assessment from the Biden administration. Even the Trump administration flat out said that the biggest issue that we are facing is not, not, organized terror from other countries. The biggest
Right.
threat we face currently is internal lone wolf attacks.
Right.
And unfortunately, you see that a lot
Yeah.
anymore. And in this case, I mean, it's open and shut. It was live streamed. It was it's absolutely terrible, and
Mm-hmm.
there's gonna be a ton of political spin on it, but there is no spin.
Right.
There is no spin.
But there's
Like,
there's no what do we do about it either. Right? We're just arguing. This shouldn't have happened. That happened. This shouldn't have happened, but it isn't our fault it happened. But nobody's like, how do we stop it? Because there is no answer. There's what, 800 million guns in a country of 350 million people, and good people with guns don't protect us from bad people with guns, even though people with guns keep telling us they're going to protect us.
well, here's so what did happen is there was an off-duty cop that was working security at that store,
Okay.
had a gun on him,
Okay.
a black former police officer. This guy walked in to the fucking nuts with body armor on, and this retired cop, took out his old service weapon, and he fired and shot at this guy and hit him. But because he had a lot of body armor on,
It didn't
it
even
didn't
affect
do
him.
anything.
Damn.
So there was, a
There
lot
was
of
a
people
good
are gonna,
citizen.
there was a
Good.
good guy with a gun there, but
Okay.
one
It's
good
not
guy with a
enough.
gun, one good guy with a gun
All right.
against somebody who is body armored up,
Yeah.
who is
Somebody
using
that
high
planned
powered
on doing what
weapons.
he's doing.
It's like, unless you've got somebody there who has high powered weapons. I mean,
Hmm.
this is kind of like the hallmarks of, I wouldn't say the hallmarks of, a very similar scenario would be like the North Hollywood shootout, for those that may or may not know what that is. There was a couple of guys who had fully automatic AKs, 100-round drums, fully body armored, and they would rob banks.
Right.
But in North Hollywood, and so
Because
what
they
ended up happening,
outmatched anybody that responded, right?
and the LAPD did not have uh they did not have M16s or AR-15s. They didn't have
Or armored cars, armored
armored
plated
cars.
cars, or anything. Yeah.
They didn't have the
Bulletproof
weapons to,
vests, like nothing.
they didn't have the stuff to go up against somebody who had, level 4 body armor,
Right.
who had fully automatic machine guns, who
Hmm.
had 100-round drums, and were using armor piercing rounds. They didn't have
Right.
anything to go up against that.
Right. You know what that reminds me of? A teacher in a school shooting with a gun.
You know,
What
I mean,
teacher is sitting there in body armor when a kid comes in and shoots up a school? Like, they want to give teachers guns, but how is that going to protect anybody? In the same way as the LA cops and these guys, they're outmatched. They're always going to be outmatched. Don't put your teachers in the way.
well,
Find a
well,
different solution here.
I mean, and so in this scenario, it's like, unfortunately, there's a lot of unknowns. We don't know
Hmm.
how much this stuff was, how much was posted online well before this happened.
Right.
We don't know like what kind of meetings this person was having with, if they were having meetings with anybody else. We don't know if this person was literally just, on their own, no communication with anybody, bought a bunch of stuff and decided that it was time. We don't know, like, if they were being fed crazy shit by specific news sources or online
Right.
forums. We don't know anything other than they posted a manifesto, and then they live streamed their crime.
I did hear that, like, word for word, it was Tucker Carlson's show, but that was from an extremely leftist sort of voice. You know what I mean? So
and and
I didn't really know. I know that per, there's people are pushing the narrative that we need to attack each other, and that's just wrong. That's not something we need to do. You
well,
know?
when you have constant rallying cries of, we have to take back our country,
Right.
as a like it doesn't belong to the other 50% of the population.
Right. And we're going to start talking about replacement theory. There's an evangelist mentality that I heard about just recently from an evangelist, that there's a fracture in the evangelist nation. And what they feel is that there is already a civil war because secularists like you and I want to push them out of government. And I just wanted to let all the evangelists know, yes, because we have a separation of church and government. We don't want you in it, just like you don't want Sharia law. So, you know,
I don't want religion in government. Like,
no,
and that's the
at
thing is,
all.
like, I don't want Christianity in government. I don't want
Right,
Judaism in government. I don't want Islam in the government. I don't want Hinduism, Buddhism,
right.
Shintoism, Jainism. I
That's
don't
right,
want any religion in government. That's the
right.
reality, is that, I want a base set of laws that are free of religion. Just like I also don't want government getting involved in religion. I don't want the government to
Exactly.
come in and tell you who you can and can't marry. I don't want the government to come in and tell you when you can and can't
Right.
worship. I don't want the government to come in and tell you when and where you can meet. I don't want those things either.
Right. We're not attacking evangelists. We're protecting our government. There's a big difference there. Like evangelists, you're attacking our government. You know, I just wanted to let them know that you're trying to shove religion into something that doesn't hold religion. And you're mixing shit up, and that's really bad for the country because we're not coming after you, we're stopping you from coming after us.
Yeah.
And you can see that as obvious as you can in abortion rights.
It's like, my question is, for the Christian religions out there that don't allow gay marriage, but there's Christian religions out there that do.
Hmm.
Why aren't you attacking each other? That's
Yeah,
not the government doing.
right,
If the Episcopalians decide that gay marriage is cool within their Christian religion, but the Catholics say no, well, why aren't you two having it out with each other? That's not
right.
government doing anything. Like, The government objectively is going to sit there and go, yeah, you guys
Oh,
decide what you're going to do. That's not our business.
right. We're going to stay out of it. We're not going to tell you. Right. You know, the Torah says that if a woman is in danger, she's obligated to have an abortion. She's obligated to protect her life. Um, the Quran, right, says that a family has the expectation to take care of life, that the woman's life is as important and abortion is not bad. It's not a sin. It's just not your first choice, you know?
Right.
And that I there's this comment that I heard. I wanted to get to replacement theory because it's so interesting. But somebody said that people are using abortion as contraception. And
Oh my
this
fucking
is this
God.
is a stereotype of contraception and abortion. They're trying to put the two together so that you'll hate all of it. Abortion is the least favorable decision a woman has to make at the time she's making it. It's like it's like saying, do I want to eat shit or do I want to eat old shit? There
It's like,
is
do you want to eat
no
a turd
good,
sandwich or a
yeah,
shit smoothie?
there's no good decision there. When abortion is the best of the options you have, the options you have are pretty shitty. Like nobody wants to have an abortion. They really don't, but there's a necessity to it. And
So,
that's not for me to judge, right?
right. So to
Right.
get back to,
Yeah, go
what's
for it.
happened in Buffalo. Um, this one of the things that I've talked about before, and I'm going to say this again. A gun-free zone only works when people who obey the rules
Uh-huh.
don't bring a gun in.
I
And so
agree.
responsible gun owners, for better or worse,
Uh-huh.
are going to look at that and they're going to be like, yeah, I don't like it, but that's
Yeah.
the rule.
Somebody's always going to have a gun. Is it going to be the good guys or the bad guys? That's the theory,
Whereas
right?
whereas people, criminals are who criminals are, they don't listen to rules, they don't follow
Mhm.
laws, they bring guns into places that they're not supposed to, and
Right.
they do things like this. Like that's the reality.
It's
I
so
don't know
crazy
if,
that they can cut your cell service in a movie theater, but they can't disarm a gun when it goes into a Walmart. You know what I mean? There's no technology to disarm that gun, but there's technology to disarm our phones, you know?
what and one of the things that we have to keep in mind, and when it comes to your second amendment right, is that there should be that right to make sure that you're able to keep not only yourself safe but your community safe.
Hmm.
And that's what the security officer was doing.
But
He was trying to do, and unfortunately it cost him his life.
the
you know
Constitution says nowhere that you should have the right to protect yourself and your community.
I would say that it does.
Where? Because I have the right to bear arms?
Hmm.
I don't have a bear to take his arms. I
Hmm.
don't know. It says we have a right to bear arms. Our militia has a right to bear arms. That's our National Guard, right? I'm not saying we should
No.
take guns away from people, but I think it's getting a little
So
overbloated. If we can't say that liberty means we have the right to abortion, if Amendment 9 that says these rights should not be restricted to just what's mentioned in the Constitution, then tell me where in the Constitution it says it's all right to have a gun.
I would say, we talk about the well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state.
Hmm.
The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay.
But
A
the militias are
well-regulated.
illegal. The
So
militias are illegal. They're not
so so let's look
sanctioned.
at let's look at that. Let's look at that objectively, just real quick.
Yeah,
What was the militia during the times of British rule?
it was everybody. Everybody needed a gun.
What was I'm looking for a specific definition. What was the militia during British rule?
It was our army, right? The
No,
Continental Army. It was
nope.
just
Think
people.
about
Just people
it was
had
just
arms.
people who had arms. We
Right.
didn't have an army. We didn't have a militia. We didn't
Right.
have any of that. We had a bunch of people who then decided individually and on their own that they were going to take up arms against, you know, the British government.
Right, because they had no sovereign protection as a nation. They had no government to protect them. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And in this case, here's what you have. You have free individuals who are trying to keep a free state,
Mm-hmm.
i.e., the ability to go out and go fucking grocery shopping without dying.
Okay.
Because the thing is that this was an issue that they had faced with British soldiers who would show up with guns, and every so often one of them would go off their fucking rocker and end up shooting civilians. I
Yeah.
mean, the Boston Massacre is one of the ones we talk about the most, but it's not the only one that happened.
Oh, agreed. That's how war happens. But you tell me how you, with a gun, fits that definition.
How me with a gun fits that
Yeah.
definition?
Are you part of a militia? Are you protecting our sovereignty as a nation, as a community? I mean, you have a gun, you have the right to use it. I'm not denying that. I'm just saying we should have an amendment to the Constitution. We shouldn't be using vague language to protect a gun right, but not a woman's right.
Oh, I
If you're gonna be legitimately strict on the language of the Constitution, you have the right to own a pair of bare arms. You don't have a right to own a gun.
well, that's where you have to look at language from the context of history.
Don't want to do that. That's why I don't want to do that. Judge Alito doesn't have to. I don't have to. Where does it say
Uh,
I can own a gun? I'll tell you where in the Ninth Amendment that says the rights of a person shouldn't be limited to the rights mentioned in the Constitution. The same place that it says a woman has a right to an abortion.
Well, and then the language is clear in the Second Amendment. You can sit down and say bear arms, but there are
Bear
two
arms.
definitions. There are two
I know.
definitions to the
I
word
know.
bear. So,
Okay, so
so
you can have arms. What's the term? What's the phrase arms? You have to look at that. I just we're this is what the Republicans have us doing, and that's the problem. I
mhm,
I believe everyone has the right to own a gun because
mhm,
I have the freedom to protect myself, right?
right,
And the government can't be there to protect me personally. So instead, they gave me the right of self protection. And so
right.
they say, yeah, you can have a gun because we don't want to be there to protect you specifically all the time. I also think that if a woman has a fetus that dies in her belly, she shouldn't have to bring that to term.
Right. Well, I
Right.
mean, she's not going to. It's
And I don't,
literally either going to kill her or
right.
or they have
And
to
I
take it
don't
out.
think the government wants to sit there and be a tribunal on women walking up saying, this is my situation. Oh, well, then we bless you. We don't bless you. They don't want to do that. They don't want to protect me individually 24 hours a day. They should give a woman a chance to protect herself.
Mhm. Well,
Okay.
and unfortunately, this is
I
where the
know.
theocracy of it comes in,
Hmm.
on that side. It's like I'm glad that you think that your religion is what should dictate government policy.
Right.
But if you're going to do that, then I mean, the reality is that the Church of Satan should have the same level of religious edict as
Yes.
the Catholic Church or Baptist Church or
Right.
whatever. And
I mean, Catholics didn't make this country. Christian evangelists didn't come over to this country and step on Plymouth Rock. Protestants did. You know?
so so that's where all of this is a
Yeah.
fucking shit show
Sorry.
in that realm. And with
Agreed.
what happened in Buffalo, there is just
Yeah.
it's it's another national tragedy in a line of national tragedies.
Well, here's the
And
thing. People want to know how to stop it. How you stop it isn't by getting rid of the guns. It's about changing the mind that holds the gun. And that's where we come in. That's
right.
something we can do. We can help people with that process, you know?
And that's where you have to have the discussion, where we have the discussion is, the right to free speech does not preclude um, calls to violence. So you can say anything that you want, but the moment you start calling for violence is when this starts to get real hairy really fast because you can't call for violence. And in the case of where you have this manifesto that is going to talk about any number of different things that they view as why they have been called to violence. The question is can you draw the line between a manifesto and the act and where they got the information from that would inform the manifesto? I think that's the next real battleground in terms of free speech is, what we have said is that we already have established precedent that calls to violence are not accepted.
Right. Here.
So then the question becomes, if somebody is getting information that they are turning into violent acts, the question is going to become, has that constituted as a call to violence?
Right.
That message. And so, in this case where, you have some far left leaning thing that says it's a Tucker Carlson episode word for word. I mean, if that's the case, you know, Tucker's going to have a real hard time proving that, his words are not a call to violence.
Right.
He's not specifically saying go out into the street and kill people, but
No, he's saying there's this crazy problem and we don't know how to solve it. Do you?
it's that whole mechanism of, well, I'm just telling a joke.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no. When your
No.
joke is when the joke is making people feel like shit, that's not really a joke. Kind of like when your words are leaving people to foment violence,
Mm-hmm.
that's not really speech that tends to lead a person
Right.
to nonviolence. And you can't it becomes real hard to separate the fact that you might not be saying specifically go out and commit violence, but the insinuation is that you're expecting people
To come up with a solution that may include violence. I didn't know that that would happen, but sure, it was one of the ideas. I think that Tucker Carlson thinks there's this woke mob that's looking to attack everybody that uses the wrong pronoun. And the truth is it's the way you deliver it. I can use the wrong pronoun and people can correct me and I'll take that. And I'll understand that, and I might forget once in a while, and I might remember. But there's an honest attempt to try. There's not an
right.
attempt to demonize. If you're looking to demonize somebody for just trying to be themselves and you don't want to know why you shouldn't, then yes, the woke mob is going to attack you because we protect each other, like you said, right?
Hmm.
We don't need a gun. Sometimes we need a mob, and sometimes we need protesters to protect our rights. But Jeffrey, you have the right to live just like I have a right to live. And I
Just
don't
like
know
those
why,
people in Buffalo had a right to live.
just like Tucker Carlson has the right to live. Like, I believe he has the right to say whatever he wants. I just find it fascinating that people use their right to listen. You know what I mean?
And
I
that's
don't want him taking his rights away because I don't want somebody listening to my show and going, "Oh, well, you talked about protesting and guns in the same thing. That's bad." I don't want somebody regulating me like they're trying to regulate women's rights. We have a First Amendment
well,
right.
and that's where, we have to remember, what we have the freedom to say what it is that we want. We just don't
Yeah.
have the freedom of consequences from that. It's
Well,
like
some people do, don't they?
well, it just depends on how much money you got.
Yeah.
And even then, at some point you're going to screw up big enough that, if you don't lose in the court of public opinion, you're
Yeah.
just going to lose in court, period.
Right.
and
And
and,
it's,
and that's the real, and the real issue is that it's like, you know once again, there was a case that actually got decided this week, about how, it was a Twitter case actually, about censorship. And the Ninth Circuit flat out said, I think it was 2-1, and the two that decided were conservative. I want to say they
mm-hmm.
were conservative. I'll have to remember this, but basically what they said is that, you know, freedom of speech is the government silencing you. It does not pertain to public corporations.
That's right. It's a take a hands off. We're not going to affect this one way or another.
It's like, so once again, people need to understand. It's like the government can't tell me what we can and can't say. And even
Right.
then, we found out that there are limits. Like, you and I can't make calls for violence in the streets. We can't. We
No.
will we will end up getting arrested. And number two, that's not what I want anyways.
And we can't stand on Susan Collins' lawn and yell at her. We can't go on Judge Alito's porch and bang on his door and threaten him, you know?
Well, you can't go on his porch, but you can certainly be on his sidewalk. I mean,
You
public
can be on the
spaces,
public property, but we
you
have
can
the
be on the
limits
public.
to where and what we can say. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. You have limits, and
Right.
there are specific limits. And it's, your right to free speech doesn't trump, somebody's right to privacy in their own
Right.
home. And that's perfectly acceptable and fine. We have put limits on free speech. Otherwise, what would be if there were no limits, is it okay for them to barge into Alito's house and sit there and
Right.
yell at him for 24 hours straight? No, it's never going to happen.
Is it okay to call a Ruby Freeman and threaten her life? No, it isn't. And you
Right.
don't want to go on Judge Alito's porch and threaten him because on the other side of that door may be somebody with a gun, somebody that's willing to protect themselves from your threats. And so it's common sense to keep that barrier. That's why the law exists. It's not so that you can't go on his property. It's his property, right? And there's rights there. But for safety. It's safety.
And when you look at what the options are in the public sphere, you have a lot.
Mhm. I got you, Billy. But Judge Alito has the right to say what he wants to. I think there's the consequences. Like I always say, karma's real. We just don't hang out long enough to watch it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's one of those
Hmm.
things where it is not like, we have to remember there are definitely cases of successful protests.
Yeah.
There's a lot of successful protests out there, and there's a lot of successful methodologies out there.
Hmm.
And there are a lot of problems out there with the way things get decided, with the way that, protests end up going. And
Hmm.
I just,
Well, think about it. Donald Trump wanted to shoot protesters in the legs, right? When they were protesting in front of the White House for George Floyd. He didn't. If he had, he would have been the bad guy because those protesters weren't threatening him or the White House, right? That's why it's a bad thing. That's why protest works when you protest and don't fight.
yep.
So just I mean, there's that's how India got their independence, by the way, is for non-protest, for non-violent protest.
Yeah.
We are gonna have our rights. This is what we want, and we are not doing another damn thing until you give them to us. And
Yeah.
tyranny always says, then we will beat you into submission. And the idea is to say, fine, you can kill us all because we don't want to live under what you're proposing. You know? That's the way
And
I
that's
feel about Republican agendas. I
right.
didn't agree to what you're saying. I agreed to the Constitution, barely.
Mhm.
You know?
And that's the thing is that,
Mhm.
it's a rough road.
Yeah. So, Jeffrey, why replacement theory says that there's a plan, an agenda to replace white people with brown people, right? And this started in France. Some right wing guy decided that Muslims were taking over England. And it's been moved over here to say brown people are taking over our country, right? And this is the reason that the guy shot 10 people in his manifesto. He says because of replacement theory. And I just wanted to go over a couple of rational reasons why there might be more brown people in our country. Instead of talking about this replacement theory, I want to talk about why our country is becoming more and more diverse. Yeah. And I want to start with climate change because it's very obvious. Climate change, it's hot as fuck on the equator, it's cooler here. Our carbon emissions are making the world hotter. They're coming here to a cooler place. And that makes sense to me. If it's India has 120-degree days this month, April. They had the hottest day ever on record. 120 degrees in India. That's fucking hot. I would want to move away from that too. What about you?
Oh, I mean, I would personally want to move away from that. That's shit. Well, especially when that 120 degrees, like we have 120 degrees day,
Yeah,
120 degrees day here. I mean, I lived in Phoenix for 2.5 years,
right.
but we also have air conditioning. We also have a reliable power grid. We also
Yeah.
have any number of different amenities that help us manage that heat.
It doesn't smell like India. You know, can you imagine India? What it smells like in 122? Or I'm just saying, like Venezuela,
Any
Panama, Honduras, like any of those. Hmm.
any rural place where you don't have reliable modern amenities, I would say.
Right. And
It's
remember that. So climate change is the heating of our atmosphere. And you have to remember when it's winter here, it's somewhere else. And so the earth is like a rotisserie chicken, right? And so it's constantly being warmed as it spins. And our carbon makes our atmosphere opaque, which means the light and heat can come in, but it can't get out. And that's why it's increasing in temperature like a rotisserie chicken. You're not
mhm,
putting a flame on the chicken to cook it. You're putting it in an atmosphere that cooks. And that's what the earth is in right now. And so you can imagine how the sun on one side heating the planet weirdly might affect the winter weather here. The
mhm,
breezes that blow through might cause systems to move in different ways, right? And
mhm.
that causes tsunamis, that causes hurricanes, devastations that people need to move away from. And that's just climate change. So people are coming to America because it's cooler. It's not as hot as fuck, right?
There's
All
that.
right.
I would
There is that.
say
What do you think? You got
number
one?
two.
Yeah.
hmm Economic opportunity.
Ooh, yeah, I have that one. I love it.
So here's the reality. It's not that, America is this place of amazing high paying jobs. It's that there are higher paying jobs
Mm-hmm.
in America doing exactly what they do back home
Right.
that they would then benefit from. So
I,
like if your choice is, pick beet fields in Mexico for, 25 cents an hour,
mm-hmm.
or pick beet fields in America for $7.25 an hour.
Yep.
I mean, mathematically speaking, that checks out. But especially when you're the farmer who can't get anybody in the country to come and pick those beet
That's
fields.
what I'm saying. The immigrants, like, well, they don't care. They don't want to do it anyway. And then they come here to do it, and we're like, "You're taking our job. We're not taking your jobs. You had first dibs at it, but it still needs to get done. 11
Right.
million open jobs in this country, and 7 million people to fill them. There's a reason that we allow immigrants in because they do the shit we don't want to do, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, there's an economic opportunity there
Mm-hmm.
and a need
Yes.
for it and a
I have that
need.
necessity because we bring a lot of Filipino nurses in, right? We bring
Mhm,
a lot of engineers in. We bring a lot of
mhm.
people in from around the world, as
Yeah,
well
we've
as we
got
bring
coders, we've got security
right.
experts, we've got any number of different people that
Silicon
come in.
Valley is full of minorities, you know?
And so, when you have, and that's the thing is like when you have places like India and China that have, over a billion people each,
Mhm.
that means that there's a lot of people who are potentially experts, and those experts are finding places here in this country because number
Yeah.
one, they're, and this is where, if you believe in the American ideal, let's go with it. They're finding that life under a communist dictator is not as amenable as a free life under American values.
And that's just true. Even the dictators feel that way. But those
And
those people fall under day workers, work visas, and I put education in there because we bring
yep,
people from around the world that have potential, and then we nurture that potential through our educational programs,
yep.
creating amazing people that do amazing things, and a lot of them are brown.
And guess
And
what?
that's okay.
And here's the thing is that education in Western schools with Western doctrine
Mm-hmm.
has inspired some places to elect those people to become like more Western democracy.
Right.
I want to say there's a couple places in Africa where they just had people win that were, that they were educated here in the U.S. and they fell in love with the way that our system works.
Mm-hmm.
So they've decided to take that back home to their countries and with their educations and try and implement something more, more akin to what they enjoyed here because they saw its benefits and its values.
You want to hear
That's
something
actually
crazy?
that's actually an old military doctrine, was the idea that we
Right.
could bring people over, show them how good the West was, And then when they decided to go back, they would change, their areas to be
Exactly.
more westernized.
You want to hear something amazing on the exact point you just made? We have a new market in Africa. Congratulations. Hello, Africa. Welcome. We are Public Access America and we want to hear from you. We're getting listens from South America, Kenya. It's
South
amazing.
America, South Africa.
South Africa,
Ah,
sorry.
well, hello,
South
South
Africa,
Africa. Would love to come
Angola,
visit you sometime. Angola, even.
Angola. Yeah. Like we just started
If I
getting listens
remember
from
right,
Africa and that is fucking
if I
awesome.
remember right, Angola is the country that has the AK on there. Or no, it wasn't Angola.
I just think it's an amazing opportunity for us. And like you were saying, people are being democratized and then being going back to these places that are oppressive and changing that. And they're bringing us along with them, Jeffrey. That's what's so cool to me, you
It's
know?
Mozambique. Mozambique is the country that has the AK on it.
Well, I am happy to know anything about Africa. I will tell you the one thing I knew about Africa before I started learning anything about Africa was there's this beach in South Africa. I think it's called Pebble Beach. And the penguins once a year come from Antarctica. They swim all the way up to that beach. So you can actually sit in a tropical climate and see penguins at the same time. And I think
Nice.
that's so
Well,
cool.
well, Africa, great to see you.
Yeah.
Uh, Great to have you around. And as always, if you have questions, by all means, send them
Hell
in.
yeah. This is what equality sounds like. Replicate it. I want to talk about something that I think is so funny to me about replacement theory. And I tagged it theft, right? And
Mhm.
all I have to do is I have to say, this is not your ancestral land, white people. Right? If you want a white society, kind of go back to where your ancestors came from. This is where the brown people's kings and chiefs and ancestral land is. Like this is theirs. This is where God intended the brown utopia to be. This isn't where God intended the white utopia to be, right? Go back to Europe, you fucks.
Like if that's your mentality, that's exactly, you want a white utopia, go back to Europe.
Right.
Find a
We're
way to
not
get into Europe, and best of luck with that.
our country's not getting browner. Their country was way too white for way too long.
Right.
And I call that theft. We're trying to usurp something that isn't ours. And if for 5,000 years, I know they just found people in Peru that date back to 5,000 years. For 5,000 years, brown people have been walking from South America to Canada, back to South America, stopping in Mexico and the United States, and living their normal lives until white people came and said, no, it's not our land, it's their land. So when you think about replacement theory, think that you replaced them. They're not replacing you.
Hmm.
Okay, cool.
So
I'm
yeah.
glad that went over better. I thought I was going to be more of an asshole about it.
Well, I
It's
mean,
so
I could be
stupid.
more of an asshole about it because it is
Yeah,
that dumb.
yeah. Okay. And so from the top of Alaska to the very bottom of Brazil, all of the people on that landmass, including us, they're Americans. We are the United States. And I think Republicans are turning us into the states with these 50 different versions of everything with no federal regulation. Then we're just the states. We're not even the United States. So we're just Americans, just like Colombians. Colombians are Americans too. Guess what? You know?
Yeah.
All right. And then I have conflict. War. Why did so many Syrians leave their home? They had to. There was a war. They had to get
Hmm.
the fuck out. And it isn't their war, right? It's a proxy war. Like white Anglo people are trying to define the region and
White
they
Anglo
keep
people
trading.
did define the region. That's
Right.
the
Well, that's what
problem.
I'm saying. They keep trying to trade it off. It was England, then it was Russia, then it was the United States, then it was Russia and the United States, then it was England, Russia, the United States, and France, and then it was NATO. These people are leaving because you're trying to cause a conflict in their land, and you need to give them the space to solve their own shit, even when it goes sideways and even when they don't side with your views. If Iran doesn't want to support America, that's not fucking our problem. That's Iran's right. And they have the sovereign ability to be whatever they want, and we don't get to say what that's like. All I say is that if people don't like Syria, please give them the opportunity to move to somewhere they like, you know? And I think North Korea, you can be North Korea, just give the people the ability to move out if they don't like it, or move in if they do like it. I believe that people don't like tyranny, autocrats, oppression, communism, dictatorship. I believe that if you give people the freedom to move where they want, North Korea would be pretty empty. You know what I mean? And so give people the choice. You get to be the tyrant you want, but we don't have to be the victims. Okay.
Mhm.
I like that. Opportunity, necessity. Uh, Jeffrey, you know why a lot of immigrants move here?
What you got?
Kim Kardashian.
That's it. I'm leaving.
Well, when you think about the American dream, the American life, she is the embodiment of that. And I don't know if she's over spray tanned. I know her, she's what, second generation American? Like her ancestors come from Armenia. She is a
Mhm.
hairy little woman that reinvented the butt. I mean, I'm going to give her the credit. She is the GOAT, right? I'm going to give her the credit. I'm not a big fan of Kim Kardashian. I think she's super superficial, and I don't like that about people. I like genuine people, but her ass changed the world's asses. And I think immigrants say, I want that too. And she's piped around the world. You know, everybody sees the Kardashians and they all think that's what America's like and they all want a piece of that. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you?
No, it's annoying to me.
Yeah, okay, fine.
It literally drives me crazy. I just
I know me too. But I thought it was so amazing that she came up.
like I just like for me like I have not really watched network television
Yeah, I know.
for or anything like that for a long time, and
I'm so jealous.
and really like the only time that I've watched stuff is like after pretty much after it's already run its course. Like
Hmm.
I watched The Office and Parks and Rec after it was already done.
I hate The Office.
It's there's some really fucking funny moments, especially
There
having worked in
is.
the office, having
There
worked in the
is.
office.
But I hate
But
that Michael Scott is not a genuine character to me. And that really sucks because Steve Carell is an amazing actor. You know,
I
it's
don't
just,
know, like having had some real idiot bosses,
uh-huh.
it his character hits in a different way for me.
Okay. I just think most bosses try and hide it. Like, I think all bosses are as stupid as Michael Scott. I just don't think they openly share that with their staff the way Michael Scott does.
Oh, it's very much for comedic effect, and I think that's what makes it so funny because
Yeah.
the thing is that we've had bosses that dumb that are just not that open about it.
Right. And the other problem I had was, guess what, Jeffrey? I'm a fucking warehouse guy. And you got a warehouse right under this paper place that you don't even barely talk about. Why wasn't there a spin-off? You know, why wasn't there an office spin-off of Warehouse? Fuck, that would have been a great show. Do you know millions of people are employed in warehouses all over America? And we don't have
Mhm.
a show. We don't have a TV show. It
Um,
sucks.
yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
I ran out of points why America's brown. America's brown. It's going to be brown. It's always going to be brown.
There's
And that
there's a lot of brown.
the end result is wonderful, beautifully mixed people that aren't
Yeah.
anything. They're everything. And that's so beautiful to me.
And I would ultimately argue, you know, if your issue is why is America brown,
Getting
here's
browner,
here's
yeah.
your answer. Because America, as we know it, was never supposed to be a race, religion, or creed. It was supposed to
Right.
be an idea, and it was supposed to be an idea that could easily be translated and accepted across multiple cultures.
Right.
So if you think America is a color, you're really mistaken about what the American dream was supposed to be.
Right.
America was supposed to be multiple colors. It was supposed to be, we were a nation of immigrants.
Mm,
We were, and that's what it was supposed to continue to be. It wasn't just a nation of European immigrants. It
right.
was meant to be a nation that, brought in the best and the brightest from all across the country, all across the world, all
Right.
across, from continents that, had very little or continents, that had a lot,
Mm,
from places where, you didn't have much rule to places where you had, iron fist dictators.
Yep.
It was meant to be more than just something surface level. It was meant to be this idea that you just couldn't get rid of.
More than a government, a people, right?
Hmm.
And you can see that in the boroughs of New York or in the low income housing of Chicago. It's the way it went. It started with, Italians and Scottish and Irish, and people hated all them. And then it was Jewish people, then it was Asian people, then it was Latino people, black people, white people. It's like, that's the way the world is. I
Hmm.
think we should be more concerned about an overall benefit financially to everybody. If everybody's more financially secure, then everybody does better. And it doesn't matter if some brown guy is picking beets for $7 an hour, surviving and building a family. That doesn't affect you at all. It benefits you, in fact, because then that cabbage is cheaper because he's not paying somebody $15 to pick it or buying a $100,000 harvester, right? So
Hmm.
immigrants make our foods cheaper and we need to bring them in. It's just, I hate Title 42. It's still and now it's like blocking all of the COVID fucking money.
It's what's hilarious is that you have a group of people who want the end to all COVID restrictions. So they're like,
Uh-huh.
okay, we'll get rid of Title 42, and they're like, no, not like that.
Right. All
It's
you have
like,
to do is replace Title 42 with a nuh-uh law. Just a piece of paper that says nuh-uh, signed by Biden. You're not coming in. Not because of COVID, but because we don't have the infrastructure to process you right now. Which is true. Donald
I
Trump
know.
stripped all that stuff to Donald Trump wanted to streamline the government. He wanted to make it more cost effective, and he did that in ways by cutting staff and budget and infrastructure in these areas. So
But then spent
yeah,
it elsewhere.
well, yeah. Of course, like Vladimir Putin. Why doesn't Vladimir Putin have an awesome army? Because he stole half the money, right? So he can't.
Yeah.
And
So
the
instead, we
most
literally have taken a group of people who were supposedly far less trained,
right.
gave them our C tier and B tier weapons,
I know.
and they're just fucking kicking their asses.
We're giving them the C tier weapons from Russia. Like they're using Russian made equipment. And I think what's so funny is somebody had said Vladimir Putin didn't, he was going to increase the army. He was going to send 100,000 recruits in, but then he realized he really didn't want to give 100,000 Russians guns because he worried about them taking over. And I thought that was so hilarious.
Well, and I mean, like at this point, like the Ukrainians are kicking some serious ass, and I think there was an
Yeah.
assessment that came out and said that Russia has lost a third of their invasion forces.
Yes.
That's a lot of people. That's
Yeah.
20 to 30,000 people that they've lost.
Yeah. 15,000 was what, 20 times what we lost in Afghanistan?
Yep.
And that was 15,000. That's not even what's wounded or who's deserted?
Yeah, like it could be. I don't know that it's up to 50,000 because supposedly they had 150,000 people, but I don't know that
Right.
it's quite that. But I mean, you're looking at anywhere from 20 to 40,000 people. I would say 20 to 30,000 people might be more accurate.
Right.
But they're not combat effective. They're
Mm-mm.
literally they've lost enough people that they would be considered a defensive force because they don't have offensive capabilities.
And they've lost 13 generals? Like they don't what in our army, if a private sees something, he can radio and he knows a set of instructions that he has, a set of scenarios he can work from, and he can call like backup and be like, this is what's going on, this is what I'm going to do, and he does it. In Russia, a private says, what do I do? And when a general's dead, there's no answer, and he does nothing because he doesn't know what to do. Because if he does the wrong thing, he dies. Somebody kills him for espionage or treason or some made up shit, right? Because that's the way Russia works. And Ukrainians are digging up Russian soldiers' bodies and asking Russia for DNA so that they can match these soldiers with their families. And Russia doesn't want to do that because they want to hide all these dead bodies. How do you hide
Yeah.
the dead bodies? Do you just tell families, oh, your son defected because he didn't want to be in Russia anymore? or he's still fighting somewhere else. Like, do these?
Defected to Ukrainian soil about approximately 6 feet down.
Yeah, but you don't want to say that people are defecting from Russia, right? So what are these people? I don't understand the theory. They're using mobile crematoriums to burn Russian bodies so they don't have to send them home.
Yep.
Man, did you see the TV? Like, I guess the TV guide in Russia all
Got
said that,
hacked.
yeah, it
Yep.
all got hacked and the news agency got hacked and
Yep.
fuck, that is awesome. We all think Russia's this like superpower because America needed a foe, right? And Russia was this lame people with a lot of nuclear warheads with no missiles to shoot them. And then-
Well, I mean, that was the thing. Like, I would say up through the 60s,
Mhm.
it was very clear that, Russia, Russia, aka the Soviet Union, was a foe because they had massive armies, they had massive capabilities, and I would argue that we were on a pretty level playing field. But what we found out, and I would argue that we started
That could
finding
be,
this
yeah.
out in the 1960s, was that, with the Bay of Pigs invasion,
Mhm.
Soviet missiles weren't capable of hitting the U.S. from where they were.
Right. They made warheads, they didn't know how to make missiles. I
No, they
just
knew how to
watched
make missiles. They just couldn't.
well,
They just could
ballistic missiles, right?
Yeah, they couldn't
Intercontinental,
make
yeah.
those. And so, like, they eventually got there. Yeah, they
Mhm.
have that, but I would say that the culmination is like we knew by the end of the 60s that the Soviets couldn't match us all that well.
Okay.
The advantage that they had was numbers.
And nukes.
And
They would use a nuke before we would.
well, and we both operated under that idea was is that
Yeah.
the opposing army would nuke us first.
Yeah, they think we're just as evil as they are. And
Yep.
it makes me think that it's the same thing with Republicans. They believe that we want to do to them what they're doing to us. They just want to do it first,
Yep.
before we do it to them. And
Yep.
that's why I wanted to explain that Christian evangelist thing. We're not coming after you, it's you that's coming after our government. And it's the same thing with Russia. We are not coming after you, but if you keep trying to cyber attack us and shut down our infrastructure, we're going to protect ourselves, right?
Hmm. Absolutely.
We have no issue. Like Russian people, I don't know whether I like you or not. I don't know anything about you. And why is that? Because you have such a closed society. Why is that? Because you have a dictator that steals half your profits and wants to protect himself. And maybe Stalin did better because he didn't steal as much, but he killed so many people, you know?
Right. And that's the thing is like I guarantee you that the average Russian citizen and the average American citizen probably have far more in common than we could ever
Yeah,
fully realize. Like they
probably.
just want to be left alone. They want to do their own thing. They want to make their money. They want to,
Mm-hmm.
that their needs are met at the end of the day, and that's that.
Right. So I heard Vladimir Putin has blood cancer.
I have heard so many different things about what Vladimir Putin has. Like at
Well,
this
I
point,
just
I'm
don't.
like,
I'm just
it's like,
curious why that rumor would be floated out there. Does that,
uh,
I mean, does that explain the war? Is it like, sorry, Vladimir's crazy right now. He has leukemia. He might be dying. So forgive the war. When he's dead, we'll end it. Like, I don't get it.
it's like I mean, I don't know that we'd forgive the war, but I know that it would stop the moment that Vladimir Putin was dead.
Yeah.
The biggest issue you're going to have is that the removal of Russian troops, especially from Crimea. Like
Yep.
that's going to be a big issue, and Ukraine's not going to stop pushing until they get Crimea back.
That's right. And neither, they shouldn't. They
No,
shouldn't.
no.
No.
So I mean, realistically, it's like I've heard any number of things that is wrong with Putin, and everything is like
Yeah.
everything from cancer treatments to schizophrenia to uh
Rabies,
just
right?
being isolated because of COVID for so long. Like
Oh,
there's
cabin fever. That's why
there's
Ukrainians are dying in mass numbers. Vlad has cabin fever.
so I mean there's so many different reasons why, and
Yeah.
it doesn't. It's all hearsay. Like nobody
Right.
has
I don't.
anything that is basically at this point is if Russians want to stop
Mm,
being embarrassed and stop being sanctioned into the ground,
mm.
they're going to have to get rid of Vladimir Putin
Yeah, there's
and
no
Lavrov.
there's words and there's actions and
Mm.
an old partner of mine, a drug addict, said, I don't know why you listen to my words when not watch my actions. I don't really care if Vladimir Putin fucking runs around Moscow naked in a turban. It doesn't matter to me. If they're still fighting a war in Ukraine, I don't give a fuck, right? They need
Hmm.
to stop. There's no excuse you can make for what's going on. There is only an action to end it.
Yep.
Somebody said that. So at the end of World War II,
Hmm.
Russia thought that America and Russia were the two superpowers that were allowed to divide the world up. So
Hmm.
everything belongs to Russia or America. And we were the dumbasses that gave our portion to Europe, but he wants his stuff back. He thinks what Russia deserves as a superpower, he should just take. And that really worries me. That means he's not going to stop in Ukraine. You know what I mean?
Well, he's not going to have much of a choice, to be perfectly honest,
I agree. He's going to be
because
shoved back in
because
ways
he
you can't
couldn't
even imagine.
he can't even take Ukraine. So
Right.
what's he going to do with a depleted force? Send them somewhere else?
Yeah.
That's
Let
not
me
going to
ask
work.
let me ask you this. If Ukraine depletes Russian forces enough, are they going to stop at the Ukraine border or are they going to start
Yes.
carving out some of Russia for them?
No, they'll stop.
I
The
would want to
reason
go
why is
I would
because,
want to go into these filtration camps and find the mass graves. I would fight
well,
to the point of getting to there.
I
You know what
think
I
I
mean?
think well, that's the problem is that you'd be on your way to Siberia at that point.
Fuck, then we're going to Siberia.
Well, and ultimately that's where you have to have the UN,
Yeah,
you have to have a greater coalition than just Ukraine, because if
yeah.
Ukraine tries to go into Russia, that's not going to go so well.
But if you
That'll be a really terrible decision.
but if
No, I agree.
Ukraine and Finland go into Russia,
It's still not going to be enough.
man, they got a million man army over there in Finland. So
It would
Turk,
take all of
yeah.
NATO.
Oh yeah, because I mean, you saw the Russian parade on May Day, right? Like there's a lot of soldiers out there.
What what the army what a lot of the military forces call that is they call those units at parade readiness. Most of that shit isn't battlefield functional.
Right.
And so it looks really fucking neat and really cool. It is not functional. Which is,
Okay.
Donald Trump wanted that. And
Uh-huh.
people had to sit down and say, look, that shit that they're parading around doesn't work.
Right.
It's
And
like,
we didn't build streets to have tanks on them,
mhm,
because we're not that society. We're not a
yep.
military society.
It's like our stuff is not in DC because our stuff is at battlefield readiness.
Right. And also
Like it's out there ready to fight.
because it's our stuff, not Donald Trump stuff. Not Joe Biden stuff, by the way, either.
No,
It's our stuff.
I would be just as opposed if it was Biden asking for a military parade. No. The
Yeah.
answer's no.
Yeah. No. No. God, what would that be like? Would there be a nap time in the middle? Sorry. I mean, so Trevor, oh, we have like 7 minutes left. Trevor Noah says that maybe we should start thinking about younger representation because the current representation obviously has no plan or thought of the future. And I thought that talking about the age of our representation was ageist and not to be done.
Yep.
I agree with him. I agree with them. I think we need I think instead of Nancy Pelosi holding back an AOC, I think a Katie Porter should be in the role of Nancy Pelosi, and Nancy Pelosi should be there to answer any questions if necessary. The same thing with like Kevin McCarthy. I think he's a disgusting tool bag. I think that like a John Capco
Hmm.
might be a better choice.
Well,
Like somebody younger in the party, not a Marjorie Taylor Greene, like not a
ugh.
Matt Gates, but somebody reasonable, and younger with a vision of progressive. Because I think conservatives can be progressive if they chose to build a platform that way.
I think there's a possibility. But here you go. Your issue then is it's not that there aren't Katie Porters. It's that everybody surrounds themselves, and they cast their votes for the older generation. You're
Yeah,
Here's where my issue is. Um, you can't discriminate based on age.
you
That's
can't.
already clear. But there is nothing that says that you have to vote for the geriatric to be uh, your Speaker of the House. or
Right.
your minority leader,
Or
or
your
your
president.
Senate leader, or your president, or the vice president, or the Senate, minority leader.
Yeah.
But the thing is that all of those people fold in around that.
Yeah.
So you have to change the culture of the House of Reps, and and basically what they're doing is they're going with whoever's been in there the longest.
Right. But do we want a president that's closer to 90 than 70? And is 70 a little? I mean, I don't want to judge because everybody has their own health and conditions, but I don't see them wanting to be the future. And I do want to tell people check out Katie Porter. Um, Katie Porter, if you want to be president, AG, Secretary of State, Mr. Access America, I'm here for you,
Mhm.
all the way.
So, I mean, that's the reality is that those internal government bodies, they have to change their own culture.
Yeah,
And it has to be that, people have to vote for younger people, number one.
yeah,
And number two, the people that are in there, when it comes to the speaker, they have to vote for who they think is going to be representative of the current generation of politicians.
I agree.
And that's so it's a twofold problem. If you want younger representation, the people have to vote for younger representation. And if you want younger representation to be your minority or your whip, then those people have to vote for it. And that we can only change the who we vote for. We can't necessarily change who we pick at this point.
That's a good point. And a lot of people like Pete Buttigieg. I don't see him enough. I don't like him. I think he's a little cocky and he doesn't respond to me at all personally. So I'm not a big fan of him. But I love his right to exist. And I want more people like him that I think the Democrats are there to throw out stupid, random ideas and solutions for things. And then it's the body politic that discusses that and decides whether it's something we need to do.
Hmm.
But I'm going to tell you, I don't necessarily agree with states' rights in the form that it is right now. I think, I think like women's rights, I think that's something that needs to be federal, not state, because I
I
don't,
don't
I
disagree
don't,
with you on
I
that one.
don't like the idea of 50 different versions of America. I saw Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, saying, "Hey, guess what? We're doing this," and I was like, "So is this what it's going to be like?" The travel ads for California are going to be like, come to California where we have very expansive abortion rights. You
Disneyland.
know, like
We have Disneyland. We have Long Beach. We
we
have
have
Hollywood. We
we
have
have
abortion.
abortion rights. Right.
It's like,
Come to Texas where you don't even need a permit to carry a gun. Like I don't like these. I don't like this. I think there's certain things that just need to be national. Otherwise we lose the united in the states. And that scares
hmm
the fuck out of me.
yep. So
I love you. Do you have any just the tips or summations or
I
well,
think I
anything?
think not right now. I don't.
Yeah, I don't really either. How about this? Stop podcasting and go outside and enjoy the day.
It's raining to
Expand.
beat hell.
Oh, I got something here. Something. So, if you want to spark your imagination, try looking at the color blue, Jeffrey. Deep blues will help you with your focus, and lighter blues will help you with your anxieties.
I will try staring at blue.
Let's try staring at blue. I like that. I love you, Jeffrey. Thank you for being here.
Have
I do
to.
have one question when I stop recording, so I'm going to push that now. Thank you for being here. Surprise. Bye. Wait, that's not a record button at all. Oh no. Sorry. I'm getting there. They added buttons to this stuff. Okay. And one more. Marco says Zach